Hello and welcome once again to GN Live. My name is Gilbert Nyambabvo. Thank you ever so much for the support you continue to give us. The big question for us this week is this. Is Nick Mangwana finished finally? Now, I say finally because if you follow Zimbabwean politics, you will know that Nick Mangwana has had his political obituary written many, many times before in some quarters. And yet, somehow, he always survives and continues to be in the job. But this week, something potentially different happened. There was, for most of Monday into Tuesday, some intense chatter in media and political circles. The indication was that the permanent secretary in the Minister of Information and Broadcasting Services may have run out of political lives. The cat was on its ninth, and it has now exhausted that possibility. Now, what's the allegation? Some people were saying that Nick, well, at least the Newswalk's platform, was reporting that Nick has started a personal war with Zimpapers Group Editor-in-Chief Elias Mambo, who is currently suspended. And according to some people, this is a war that Nick cannot and will not win. Why are they saying that? Well, it's because Mambo is believed to be both politically very well protected and personally connected to some really powerful figures in the country's politics, going to the very highest levels of authority. So the big question for us is this: what exactly is going on? Are these people at war? And if so, why are they fighting? Stay with me as we go behind the scenes and unpack what is going on after this break. Welcome back. My name is Gilbert Nyambabve and this is GN Live. Now, before we go into this alleged war between Nick Mangwana and Elias Mambo, I want to begin, as I always do, by looking at the background and the context so that our viewers, have the appropriate perspective on the issues we're talking about. Now, we need to understand, there's something we need to understand about how public media operate in Zimbabwe. And this is very, very important because we end up having a lot of misrepresentation arising from this misunderstanding. To make the point, I'm going to use an example of what we have here in the UK where I live. The Prime Minister and the ministers, there's a facility which allows them to appoint what are called special advisors. These are political appointees, and there are people who are in these roles temporarily. I will explain that later. And they are appointed to these roles to assist the minister with communications, policy and strategy, or economics, whatever the minister wants. And there is something which is understood by everybody who is involved in this. You are appointed as a SPAD to serve this particular minister, which means when that minister is removed and or reassigned, your time as a SPAD in that ministerial department is also up. That is because the new minister was coming, will want to bring their own special advisors to work with them. Moving on to the Zimbabwe scene, I'm going to propose and suggest, quite controversially, and I know that my colleagues won't be too happy with this, I'm going to suggest that while state media editors and even executive management, professional journalists, functionally, they operate very much like special advisors. Functionally, for me, they are essentially political communication appointments for the incumbent information minister. Now, I'm going to try and support what I'm alleging here. Why am I saying the editorial roles, the editorial functions at public media in Zimbabwe are essentially special advisor roles available to serve the incumbent minister? I'm going to ask a question. When was the last time any of you saw an advert for Zimpapers CEO or group editor-in-chief at Zimpapers? You also hardly ever see the role of Editor Sunday Mail, Editor Herald advertised anywhere, and yet this posts are always filled somehow. The same applies to ZBC. You rarely see the role of CEO, Director News, Director Radio, Director TV or content being advertised, but they are always somehow filled. I'm aware that last year ZBC did go through a process of advertising and doing interviews when they were recruiting the CEO and some of these directors, but if you are properly connected, you will know that the process is designed to sanitize and give effect to a preference which has been expressed to the board by the minister in terms of who he wants in these roles. So if you apply for those jobs, you are really just wasting your time because the choice has already been made. You only apply when you have been told to do so by either the minister or the PS or the board, and the assurance is that you are the person that they want. Otherwise, really, you're wasting your time. However, I would still recommend that people engage with the process for the experience, and also, you get to contribute to your ideas to the board of knowledge around these institutions and media in general. So you can apply and participate in the process, but if you have not been told that you're the preferred candidate, you are essentially wasting your time and you won't get the job. So that's how that works. Now, because this is how these roles are filled, they are an expression of the wish of the minister. What it means, and this is important in terms of understanding the problems we are said to be having right now between Nick Mangwana and Elias Mambo. When the minister who has appointed them, these editors and executive managers is reassigned, reshuffled, or sacked, it essentially means that the time is up for these editors and executive management. And I'm not saying something that is not known. Those who have followed how these institutions are run will know that every time there is a new information minister, the following will happen. You're going to get a new board being appointed to ZBC and Zimpapers. After the board has been appointed, you're going to get new executive management being appointed. They normally deal with only the politically sensitive positions. They don't really bother with finance and marketing, all of that. It's usually the editorial positions, and for ZBC, you're talking about director news, director radio, director TV, and all content, as they call it today. So that is something which is important to understand. So if we come back to what is happening right now, when Minister Muswere was moved from the Information Ministry and reassigned elsewhere. We're going to get into how this happened later on. What is expected to happen, because this is the tradition, is that the new minister is going to want to appoint their own special advisors. They're going to want to appoint their own executive management and editors at the ZBC and at Zimpapers. That is just how it happens. So what you do if you are in those roles is you know what is coming and you're prepared for it. At Zimpapers, how this works is that the person that normally gets sent home is the CEO. But the other guys are reassigned to other roles within the institution. A process that takes away whatever responsibilities and authorities you had, but ensures that you at least retain your salary and are able to pay school fees for your children, the legal ones, and the allegations. So that is what happens in terms of Zimpapers. They have a fairly neat and humane process whereby people are reassigned to other roles, which sometimes are created for that very purpose. ZBC, however, is a different animal. Then, if you choose to fight and refuse to go, you're still going to leave the institution, but it will get messy. That's how we end up with situations whereby people are leaving ZBC, but that departure involves travel through and enjoyment of the hospitality of the state at an institution called Harare Remand Prison. They're going to come up with criminal charges against you. And these are criminal charges they don't even need to prove. The purpose and function of that criminal charge is to get you away from the institution. You are suspended pending investigations. And you're going to get stuck in the courts for many, many years. Magistrates' courts, you appeal to the High Court, and this goes on until you give up because you're going to run out of money to pay lawyers. That is how these people are appointed, and that is how they are normally removed and that is how they're normally removed when a new minister comes into office. However, my understanding is that while that may be the tradition, there is no appetite at the Ministry of Information to follow that tradition and make changes at Zimpapers and ZBC right now. And one of the reasons is a very simple one. It would look too obviously politically vindictive. It just doesn't look good. If you look at Zimpapers, they made executive and editorial changes in terms of the leaderships of these two departments in January this year. For ZBC, these guys came into office just last year, and so you can't be removing these people from office in March when they were appointed in January. So my sense is that the comrades who are in these roles can relax, but not for too long. I think they were going to be given, at least at a minimum, 1 year and at most 2 years, after which the new minister will want to bring in their own team so that they can drive their own agenda. There was actually one view that, look, we need to change. We can't just continue to follow that tradition whereby new minister comes, people lose their jobs. It doesn't look ethical, it doesn't look professional. My view was that, look, this is politics we're talking about, Zimbabwean politics. If you want to be ethical, go and join the church. You can't continue to have a situation whereby the key positions in the institutions that you lead have people at the top who bear allegiance, are accountable, and continue to report to a different minister. It just doesn't work. You want to put your own team in there who are accountable to you to drive your own agenda, so that should the president say, I'm not getting the outcomes I want from the Minister of Information, you can't blame it on people who were left by the guy who was there before you. That's just how it works. So the question is, if there's no appetite at the ministry to make changes at Zimpapers and ZBC, why then was Elias Mambo suspended? The suspension of Elias Mambo was related to that ZBC corruption story which circulated quite recently. Now, according to Newsworks again, there were suspicions which remain unproven that Elias Mambo may have leaked information about this ZBC corruption to the independent newspaper. Why would the suspicions target him? Newsworks are saying that this is because Elias Mambo used to work at the Independent for over a decade before he joined public media. But the real issue with the ZBC corruption story was something else entirely. Those who crafted the allegations of corruption were trying to target ZBC chairperson Elias Mambo. But they made the mistake in their targeting. Instead of doing what the Americans call precision bombing and targeting precisely Elias Mambo, they ended up dragging the office and person of the president into the controversy. And in the Zimbabwean context, in Zimbabwean politics, that is extremely dangerous territory, because they are always political actors whose job is to get angry on behalf of the president and think it is their duty to defend the president aggressively. And once that happens, someone has got to be seen to be held accountable. Because when you accuse the president of covering up for corruption at an institution, I mean, that is a serious allegation, and there isn't evidence to support that allegation. You're going to have these people who defend the president demanding action. Because Elias was suspected to have leaked the story, and there's no evidence to support that, there are people who are demanding action because the president was involved. But there's also an internal element to this whole saga. What happens is that when the minister appoints his preferred special advisor editors to these institutions, it results in resentment internally. There are people who have been with the institution for 10, 15 to 20 years who feel that these opportunities should be made available to them. And so they are aggrieved about your appointment. And when your minister is removed, these internally aggrieved people see an opportunity to go against you. They come up with all kinds of allegations which are sent to the authorities. In the case of Elias Mambo, the allegations was that after the minister was removed, Minister Muswere that is, and a statement was issued by the ministry denying the corruption allegations at ZBC and condemning the implication of the president. The Herald and the Sunday Mail reported that statement. Quite a lot, I was surprised. I think 4 stories were done on the same statement throughout the weekend. So during an editorial meeting after that weekend, allegations were made that Elias Mambo criticized the Herald and the Sunday Mail for running these stories, dismissing as false allegations of corruption at ZBC. The other allegation was that he also said that the comment of the former minister should have been sought. Now, this is not proven. These are the allegations according to documents we have seen. And so someone takes these allegations to the ministry. The ministry directs that there should be an investigation of these allegations against Elias Mambo. He is duly suspended on the 24th of February to facilitate these investigations. Now, we've got to remember that there are 2 issues which are being dealt with here. There is pressure from people who get angry on behalf of the president to act against those people who are suspected to have leaked this story to the Independent. But we also have within the ministry an attitude that we can't be seen to be looking to be vindictive. So you want to come up with an approach which balances and speaks to the interests of all of these factors. So the ministry then says Zimpapers investigate this matter. Due process must happen. He is suspended to facilitate those investigations. If those investigations clear him, he comes back to work. If those investigations find that there is a case to answer, due process must continue. That is the position of the ministry, which is communicated to the institution. This idea that there is some animosity between Nick Mangwana and Elias Mambo, and that Nick Mangwana is pursuing some personal vendetta against Elias Mambo, is really a misrepresentation. The truth of the matter is that there is no appetite at the Ministry of Information to look politically vindictive, because it will be too obvious. And so they've come up with a process which kind of addresses the concerns of all of the forces which are putting pressure on them. You have due process, they investigate. If he's found to have no case, he comes back to work. If the determination is that there's a case to answer, let the chips fall where they may. So, and also the other point to make is that, people are alleging that Nick is going after Elias because he's close to Minister Muswere. Of course, Nick and Muswere had their own issues, didn't quite get along. But once Muswere is removed from the ministry, if you are Nick, you have won. He has essentially won. Muswere is no longer in the ministry, and Nick has remained. So what's the point of going after Elias Mambo? It's just needless waste of energy. And it will also look too obvious in terms of its inherent political vindictiveness. So here's my view about what is going on and what will happen. The investigation will run its course. If Elias Mambo has no case to answer, which is his position, he says he has no case to answer, he will obviously return to work, and we should see this investigation it has actually been concluded. We are going to likely get results in the next few days. But regardless of the outcome, one thing is almost certain: changes will eventually come to Zimpapers and ZBC. They are just not going to happen immediately, because as we know, once the new minister is settled in, they almost always bring in their own communication team. That is the tradition. That is how the political media system works in Zimbabwe. And when that moment arrives, it is usually better to live quietly, because resisting the political transition rarely ends well. Sometimes it ends with a very uncomfortable stay at Harare Remand Prison, and really, no one wants that. Thank you for watching.